He was my sister's husband. But that night, when he knocked on my door, I didn't ask why, and I didn't tell him to leave. My name is Hannah. I'm 40. No children. No second marriage. Just a small house with pale curtains and a silver kettle that sings at exactly the same pitch every morning. Most days, I'm a quiet thought in a quiet town. Even the birds seem to skip my windowsill. My sister, Anna, lives 20 minutes away, depending on traffic. She likes to say 15, but she drives like someone trying to outrun her own name. We see each other often. Family dinners. Birthdays. Long tables full of polite laughter and shallow wine. She always brings something store-bought and calls it homemade. I never call her out. That's the way we work. Love, held together with safety pins. James, her husband, is the kind of man people trust immediately. He has that carpenter's stillness, like nothing could surprise him. He fixes things without asking, holds babies like they might break, and always finds the extra chair when someone unexpected shows up. Reliable. Calm. The sort of man you think about in broad strokes because he fits into all of them. I had never looked at him longer than I should. He never lingered near me. Never made me nervous. Never made me curious. Until he did. It started with something so slight it might not have been anything at all. A glance too long while refilling my wine. Not a stare, not flirtation, just a moment where he didn't look away. A pause. That's all. But pauses have gravity. They collect things. Glances. Silences. Accidental touches. They build. At Anna's birthday, he brought the cake inside while she showed off her new kitchen lighting. He set it down, looked at me, and for a breath too long, didn't speak. I remember it only because I felt it. That strange, involuntary alertness. Like someone calling your name in a crowd before you realize you've even heard it. He didn't say anything, just smiled that soft, patient smile of his. The kind he gives toddlers when they hand him scribbled drawings. I told myself not to think about it. There was nothing to think about. But 3 days later, I found myself remembering the color of his shirt. It was a kind of gray that looked expensive without trying. I live alone. Not in the tragic sense. Just quiet. By choice. My marriage ended when I was 33. We'd run out of things to say. That's all. No betrayal. Just silence that got too heavy to lift. He moved on. I bought this house. The curtains were already here when I moved in, and I've never changed them. I like how they soften the light. I fill my evenings with rituals. Tea with lemon. Crossword puzzles. Books I've read more than once. I have my patterns, and I keep them intact, as if breaking them might let something uninvited in. Still, sometimes at night, when the streetlights buzz and the neighbor's dog goes quiet, I sit at the window and wonder what I've forgotten to need. That's what I was doing when he messaged. It was late, just after 11. I was in bed reading. The glow of my bedside lamp casting warm shadows across the floor. My phone lit up on the nightstand. Are you still awake? No name. Just the preview. But I knew. I didn't answer right away. I stared at it, breath shallow, the way you do when you're not sure if something is real. Then it lit up again. I was driving. Didn't know where to go. I stared longer. My heart moved up into my throat. I didn't know what he meant. Or maybe I did and just didn't want to name it. I typed, "Everything okay?" He didn't respond. That should have been the end. A missed moment, tucked back into the drawer with old yearbooks and receipts. But the truth is, it stayed open. Even after I turned the light off. Even after I rolled to my side and tried to forget the shape of his words. The next day, Anna called. Her voice was normal. Bright. She asked if I still had the recipe for that baked feta thing I made once. Said she'd try it for Sunday. No mention of James. No hint of anything askew. So I told myself, maybe I imagined it. Maybe he messaged me by mistake. But I didn't delete the texts. That Sunday, we sat at her long table again. James passed the bread. Anna laughed too loudly. The dog barked at the mailman. Everything was the same. Except he didn't look at me. And that somehow was worse. A week passed. Then two. The message faded into the background hum of unanswered questions. Until the knock. It was late. I remember because I'd just closed my book. The clock said 12:03. The house was warm, but I still had the blanket pulled to my chest, an old habit I've never shaken. The kind you carry from childhood like lint on a sleeve. The knock was soft. 3 taps. Not loud. Not urgent. I froze. I don't get visitors at night. My neighbors are kind, but distant. My phone hadn't rung. I waited. 3 more taps. I slipped out of bed, heart starting to thrum, and padded to the door. No footsteps outside. No voices. Just the porch light catching the edges of shadow. I didn't look through the peephole. I opened it, and there he was. James. His jacket was wet from rain. His hair clung to his forehead. His hands were deep in his pockets. He didn't look at me right away. I stepped back. He stepped in. No words. Just air between us. The door clicked shut behind him. I didn't ask why he was here. He didn't tell me. We stood there, 2 people who had no business being alone together at midnight. His shoulders were hunched slightly. Not with shame, more like the weight of something finally put down. I couldn't go home, he said, his voice low. I didn't know where else to go. He didn't look broken. Or drunk. Or angry. Just stripped. Like something had been peeled back. I nodded once. Pointed to the hallway. Want to sit? He didn't move. The silence stretched. He walked to the window instead. Stood there, staring out, his wet shoes leaving dark prints on the floor. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. I went to the kitchen, filled the kettle. The act felt sacred, ordinary, comforting, something I could still control. When I brought the tea back, he hadn't moved. I set it on the table. Still, he didn't turn. Did you and Anna fight? He nodded once. Long pause. Bad? Another nod. Then, finally, he turned. Faced me. And in that look, I felt it. He wasn't here because of the fight. He wasn't here because he needed a place to sleep. He was here because he knew I wouldn't ask for more than he could give. And I didn't. He didn't touch me. He didn't even sit. He just stood there, taking me in like I was a photograph of someone he remembered differently. Before he left, he stepped closer. Too close. Not inappropriate. Not overt. Just too close. My breath caught. Not because of what he might do, but because of what he wouldn't. And then he whispered, "You've always seen me, haven't you?" I didn't nod, didn't blink, didn't breathe, because he wasn't wrong. And then he left. He didn't take the tea. He didn't say goodbye. And when I closed the door, I leaned against it like it could hold the weight of everything he left behind. It couldn't. The next morning, I washed the mug. The water was still warm. I didn't tell Anna. I didn't tell anyone. But that silence is the loudest thing I still carry. It was just past midnight. I was in bed reading. No makeup. Slippers. Lamp still on. The kind of night that feels like a pause, not heavy, not light, just waiting. The book lay open on my chest. My eyes drifted to the curtain where the wind shifted shapes in the fabric. I hadn't checked my phone in an hour. I like to pretend I didn't wait. But I did. The knock came soft. 3 taps. Like someone testing the edge of a thought. Almost gentle. My skin prickled before my thoughts caught up. I knew. I didn't need to look through the peephole this time. Didn't need to wonder. He was on the other side of that door, and I was already halfway to it. The moment before I opened it, I stood still, my fingers curled around the doorknob. The hallway behind me was too quiet. The house held its breath. Then I turned the knob, and there he was. James. Same jacket, same stillness. But something had shifted in his posture, not his stance exactly, but the way he held it. Like he'd stopped trying to hold anything at all. His eyes were darker than I remembered, less like color and more like shadow. "Hi," I said, because I had to say something. He nodded. I was driving. I stepped back again, just like before. A mirror of that first night. Except this time, I noticed that my throat had tightened. This time, I felt my breath hesitate in my chest. He stepped inside. No umbrella. His shoulders dusted with rain. I didn't know where else to go. He said it exactly the same way as the last time. And yet it felt different. He stood in the center of my living room like a question I couldn't answer. I motioned toward the couch. "You can sit." He didn't. He just looked around, not inspecting, not curious. Just taking it in. "I like it here," he said softly. "You've never been here," I replied. "Doesn't matter. It still feels like you." That silenced me. He walked over to the bookshelf and trailed his fingers along the edge of a spine. "Still reading Alice Munro? You remember that? You were reading her the first time I came with Anna. Back when she introduced me. That was almost 10 years ago." He turned to look at me, the smallest smile tugging at the edge of his mouth. "I have a good memory." I didn't answer, because I remembered that night too. I remembered the way Anna spoke over him, how she laughed loudly to fill the space between them. I remembered how he said nothing for most of the evening, just listened. Back then, I thought he was shy. Now I know better. Now I understand the silence wasn't emptiness. It was weight. I brought him a towel. He didn't dry off. Just held it. "Did you and Anna fight again?" I asked. He didn't respond right away. Then, "No. Not really. Not really." What did that mean? I sat down slowly, tucking my legs under me. He remained standing. He glanced toward the door. "I can leave." "No." He looked at me then. Really looked. And I felt it again. That unbearable stillness between us. Not because we didn't know what to say, but because we did. I stood up too quickly. The blanket I'd had around me slipped to the floor. "I'll make tea," I said. He didn't stop me. But when I returned with 2 mugs, he was standing by the window again. Just like last time. I placed the mugs on the table. "You don't have to explain," I said quietly. His shoulders shifted, the faintest movement, like breath. "I think I wanted someone to notice," he said. "That's all." "You think I didn't?" "I think you did. That's why I'm here." The room felt smaller suddenly, as if the walls remembered something we hadn't done yet. I took a step toward him. Not close. Just closer. "What happened?" I asked, softer this time. He closed his eyes briefly, like he was checking for a wound he couldn't show. "She accused me of not loving her." "Not really." Said I always hold something back. "Do you?" His eyes opened. They met mine. "I don't know anymore." I wanted to reach for him. I didn't. He moved first, one step, then another, until there was just that breath of space between us again. He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. The air changed. And I knew. He wasn't here to confess. He was here because something inside him had broken, and he thought maybe I could hear it. "I think you're right," I whispered. "About what?" "You didn't know where else to go." He stared at me like I had just said something truer than either of us had ever admitted aloud. He looked down, then back up. "I think about that night," he said. My heart kicked. "I didn't do anything," he added. "Neither did I. That's the problem. I shook my head, barely. No. That's the line. He took another step. I could feel the heat of him now. That closeness that made my breath shallow. He raised a hand halfway, then lowered it. I don't want to ruin anything. You didn't. I want to know if you feel it too. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him that he was imagining things, that grief and guilt twist reality into dangerous shapes. But I couldn't lie. Yes. That word, just one syllable, changed everything. He stepped back like he'd touched fire. We stood there, neither moving. Then he turned, walked to the door. Paused. I won't come again, he said. I waited. I just needed to know. The door opened. Closed. Silence. But it wasn't empty. It buzzed. I stood in the center of the room, heart pounding. Not because of what he'd said, but because I knew the truth. He would come again. And I would let him. I didn't tell anyone he came. And he didn't come again. Not right away. But the absence was louder than the knock had been. The morning after, I moved through my house like a guest. I cleaned without needing to, rearranged books, lit candles I usually saved for colder evenings. The scent of cedar and something faintly citrus tried to erase the memory of his rain-damp jacket. It didn't work. His tea mug sat, untouched on the table until noon. I washed it slowly, my hands lingering on the curve of the handle as if it might remember the warmth of his fingers. Anna texted me that afternoon. Dinner Friday? Just us girls. Just us. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Of course. That was always our answer. To everything. Of course. When Friday came, I wore a blouse that felt softer than I remembered. Pale blue. Nothing dramatic. But when I caught my reflection before leaving, I noticed the way it framed my collarbone. A line of skin I hadn't thought about in years. Anna greeted me at the door with a glass of wine already poured. Her smile wide, brittle. We deserve this, she said. I nodded. James wasn't home. I knew before I even stepped inside. I could feel the shape of his absence. Work late? I asked, casual. She shrugged. Something with the contractor. Or a deadline. I don't ask anymore. The words dropped too easily, like she wanted me to catch them. I didn't. Instead, I followed her to the kitchen. We talked about nothing. Shows we weren't watching. Recipes we didn't intend to try. The weather. Always the weather. Halfway through dinner, she said, "You know he used to be different." Who? She gave me a look. James. I didn't answer. He used to make me laugh. Really laugh. You remember that? I think so. I wonder sometimes, she said, swirling her wine, what changed? Him or me? Maybe both. She looked at me then, really looked, and for one sharp moment I felt exposed. But then she smiled, shrugged, and reached for the salt. The rest of the evening passed in practiced rhythm. Dishes. Tea. A hug at the door that lasted 1 second too long. She held on like she wanted to ask something but couldn't find the words. And I let her wonder. Because I couldn't say it. Not yet. Not that he had been at my door. Not that I had let him in. Not that I still felt his nearness every time I turned off the lights. The next week was normal. Which is to say, unbearable. I returned to my routines. The grocery list. The radio news. The slow rhythm of spoons on porcelain. I returned to my solitude like someone putting on an old coat, still warm in places, but frayed at the edges. I didn't see him, but I saw traces. His handwriting on the envelope Anna gave me to drop at the post office. His jacket slung over the back of her chair. His shoes by the door. And then, one day, he came again. Not at night. Not unannounced. I was in the garden, pruning the lavender, when I heard footsteps on the gravel. I didn't look up right away. I told myself it was a neighbor, maybe a delivery. But the air shifted. I looked. It was him. Hey, he said, hands in his pockets. Anna said you had her book. The one about the Danish woman and the bees. I blinked. Yeah, I think I do. We both knew he didn't care about the book. Still, I let him in. This time, he sat. This time, he let his eyes move slowly around the room like he was memorizing it. Like he'd dreamed about it. New curtains? He asked. No. They've always been like that. He nodded, looking at them longer than necessary. I handed him the book. He didn't open it. Just held it. She's not wrong, you know, he said quietly. About what? I don't give everything. And yet, here you are. His mouth twitched, not a smile, not exactly. Something smaller. Something heavier. I think I needed to see if this was real. What is? He looked at me. The weight of it landed between my ribs. This thing that hums in the quiet, he said. I didn't answer, because I knew exactly what he meant. The hum, the ache, the slow burn of wanting without touch. He stood. I should go. And then, just before the door, he paused. I've started walking at night, he said. Down Hollow Creek, near the bridge. Around 9. Helps me sleep. He didn't wait for a reply. Didn't need one. The door closed softly. And that night, at 8:57, I stood in front of my closet longer than I needed to. I changed into jeans that fit just right. Pulled on a sweater I hadn't worn in years. The one with sleeves too long and shoulders that made me feel safe. At 9:10, I was walking down Hollow Creek Road. He was already there. He didn't look surprised. We didn't talk. We just walked. His hand brushed mine once. Light. Barely there. But my entire body lit up like static. At the bridge, we paused. The water below moved slow, dark, steady. He said, I almost told her once. Why didn't you? Because it wasn't about her. I exhaled. And without thinking, I said it. You shouldn't come here again. He turned his head toward me. I know. But he did. Every Tuesday. Every Friday. Not always late. Not always long. Sometimes we didn't speak. Sometimes we just stood on my porch while the sky faded to ash. Sometimes he brought me things, a book he thought I'd like, a pastry from a new place, once a scarf because he said he liked the way green looked on me. I didn't stop him, and I didn't tell Anna. I started saying no to her invitations. Small excuses, a headache, a deadline, a class I forgot to mention. She stopped pressing, but I saw the way she watched me the last time we met. She said, you look different lately. I said nothing, because how could I explain that my body had started to memorize someone else's breath? That I'd begun to write his name at the top of my journal pages, not even realizing it? That every time he left, my hands shook for minutes after? One evening, it happened. Not the crossing of a line, but something more dangerous. He stood close, as always, near the window. The room dim with dusk. I handed him tea. His fingers touched mine. This time, I didn't let go. Neither did he. He set the mug down, carefully, his fingers trailing over mine until the very last second. He looked at me. I looked back. And then, the smallest tilt of his head. A question. I didn't nod. But I didn't move away. And that was enough. He leaned in. Not a kiss. Just breath. Close. Too close. Then he whispered. I can't stop thinking about your hands. My throat closed. I looked down. He stepped back, quickly. I'm sorry, he said. No. He waited. No, you're not, I whispered. He didn't deny it. The silence between us swelled. I should go, he said again. You always do. But I didn't ask him to stay. Not yet. Because it wasn't the touch that undid me. It was the wanting. And the lie I kept repeating to myself. Nothing is happening. He came one last time. I knew it before he knocked. Before the porch light flickered. Before the air shifted in that way I had come to know. I felt it in my chest. A pressure. A kind of stillness that whispered, this is the end of something. The knock was soft. I opened the door without pause, and he stood there, not in the rain this time, not stripped of explanation or lost in the weight of a fight, but steady. Warm. Like someone who had finally made peace with the choice to leave. "Hi," he said. "Hi." We didn't smile. There was no need. He stepped in, took off his jacket, set it on the same chair he always used but didn't sit. "I won't stay long." I nodded. His eyes moved around the room, the framed picture near the bookshelf, the window cracked slightly to let in the early evening air. He noticed everything. He always did. I brought tea without asking. We stood side by side near the window, 2 mugs untouched. The sun low, golden. "Denver," he said after a while. I looked up. "When?" "Monday." I didn't ask for how long. I already knew. I wasn't going to say goodbye, he added. But that felt wrong too. Silence settled again. It wasn't awkward. It never had been. Just full. I set my mug down. "I dreamt about you," I said, without meaning to. He turned his head slowly. "What kind of dream?" "The kind that leaves you aching when you wake up." His eyes softened. Not with pity. Not even with affection. With understanding. He walked to the bookshelf. Ran his hand along the spines again. "You remember the first time I came here," he said. "The rain. You said you didn't know where else to go. I still don't." I swallowed hard. And then, slowly, deliberately, he stepped closer. Not to touch me. Just to be near. His hand lifted, hovered. This time, I closed the distance. Our foreheads touched. A quiet, almost reverent contact. No kiss. No collapse. Just warmth. Breath. Truth. "I don't want to be your shadow," he whispered. "You're not," I said. "But I will be. If I stay." I nodded, my eyes still closed. "I know." We stayed like that for a while. Just long enough for my heartbeat to slow. Then he stepped back. Walked to the door. Paused. Turned. And said, "You saw me." When no one else did. And I didn't say anything, because that was all he ever needed from me. He left. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse against the door this time. I just stood there. Until the hallway grew dim. And then I moved. Not fast. Not dramatically. I folded the blanket on the couch. Washed the 2 mugs. Turned off the porch light. And went to bed. The next morning, I opened every window in the house. Let the cool air in. Stripped the sheets from the bed and changed them. I brewed coffee and didn't check my phone. The house was quiet. But not empty. Inside me, something had stilled. Not a hollowing out, but a settling. A new room, maybe? One I hadn't known existed. That afternoon, Anna called. She didn't mention him. She told me about a recipe that had failed, about her coworker's terrible haircut, about how maybe she was thinking of taking a solo trip, just to reset. I listened. I made the right sounds. I smiled into the phone. "I'm proud of you," she said suddenly. "You've changed. I don't know how, but you seem more yourself lately." "Maybe I am," I said. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table with my journal open. No entries about James. No confessions. No metaphors. Just a blank page. And then I wrote. He came. I let him in. He left. But I stayed. Not in the same way. Not in the old silence. But here. In my body. In my voice. In my name. Weeks passed. And then months. He didn't write. Didn't call. Didn't ask. Neither did I. That was never what this was. It was not a love story. It was a mirror. He handed it to me, and I didn't look away. And now, when I dress, I choose things that make me feel something. Not for someone else, but for the person I am becoming. I walk differently. I laugh less politely. I touch the edges of my own longing without shame. Sometimes I pass by his old house. Sometimes I see Anna on her porch, humming to herself, cup of tea in hand. She looks peaceful. I hope she is. I hope he is. But more than that, I hope I am. Because what happened between us wasn't a sin. It wasn't betrayal. It was awakening. Brief. Impossible. Necessary. It didn't burn me. It broke something open. And now I know the sound of my own soul, whispering. You are still here. You are still wanted. You are still yours. He was my sister's husband. Still is. But that night, and every night that followed, he knocked. And I didn't ask why. And I didn't tell him to leave. And that silence is the loudest thing I still carry. But it no longer hurts. It echoes. Like a name I finally learned how to say. My own.